equal society. I don't believe there is any institution based on today. More or less, I would say that the division in today's society isn't on skin colour. Let me finish. Isn't on culture. It's on affluence.
Sorry, just get the mic in there.
Not to achieve anything in this society.
Content over everything!
So I'll ask a simple question. We know that historically certain people are now rich because of the inheritance of their ancestors, yes?
Yeah, absolutely.
That's built the foundation for them to be affluent, yes?
Yeah.
So when we're talking about people with equal opportunities, yeah? Can you prove to me historically that everyone has had the same opportunity to build those fundamentals for their legacy after?
They haven't.
So where are you getting this idea that we've now created a very equal society?
So, okay.
When we talk about wait, let me finish. When we talk about reparations, I know in particular your ears tend to kind of shut off. But there's a reason Africans and people of color in particular talk about reparations, because you like to talk about we live in an equal society, especially when it comes to America. Where have you basically amended the faults of your historical past, basically taken away the benefits and the privileges that you have had to build those fundamental building blocks for the affluent wealth that you have now? Can you please tell me?
So perfect. Now, if you listen to the way you spoke to me there, it was very, can you, white man...
I'm sorry, if I'm going to repeat what you said. If you don't like what I said, I'm really sorry. You can only answer with logic, so go ahead.
Can I answer? It's very relevant. You're saying you've built up wealth, meaning me, yeah? Because of my skin colour.
No, not necessarily.
Okay, so how have I built up wealth?
Say that again?
How have I built up wealth? Because you kept on saying you.
So, when I say you, are you not talking the points, and you in particular, saying that we are now equal? Who says that? Because minorities don't say that.
Yes, they do. I am an ethnic minority and I say that.
You're an ethnic minority? Yes. Go and tell me how.
I'm Jewish. Yeah?
That's the ultimate ethnic minority, by the way.
Go on.
No, so I'm Jewish.
Go on, yeah.
Yeah. My family were peasants from Poland. We were slaughtered in the Holocaust. We built up no wealth. We came to this nation. No worries. We came to this nation as peasants. Yeah. I then moved and intermarried with British people. My family intermarried with British people. I grew up in a working class white community in the north of England with no economic advantage, no inheritance. And you looked at me and you said you based purely on my skin colour. Right. I owe you no reparations.
All right.
I owe you no reparations.
Okay, we'll talk about that.
No.
We'll talk about that. We'll talk about that.
We will.
We'll talk about that.
Why do I owe you reparations?
Because I asked you a question.
About reparations.
I asked you a question.
Yeah, and I'm responding directly.
I asked you a question, and you went much deeper, saying that this is now about my religion, right?
No, my ethnicity, not my religion. Not my religion.
No. I hear this commonly. Wait. I hear this commonly in the park.
Can you just? I just want to establish one thing. We're not talking about my religion. And I just want to make sure you understand.
We're not talking about my
I'm going to ask.
Boris.
Wait. Yeah, go on.
Because he's been persecuted just like you and
I'm going to ask that question. Don't worry about persecution. I'll ask.
The story he's told you of himself puts him exactly in the same place as you and me.
I'm not talking about religion. I don't assume your background. I don't assume whether your family came here from Africa, whether they were slaves, I don't know your history. So I'm not. No, but let me finish. I'm talking.
You came into the conversation saying minorities are attacking white people when no one had said that. No one had made it about race.
You said white.
Please do not. No.
You said whites are moving into Bethnal Green. You said whites are moving into Bethnal Green and pushing up the house prices.
Spare me the idea that you're trying to not make this about race and you're jumping on this. Now, when we talk
I am making it about race. I'm saying my race is Jewish.
When we talk about Judaism, this is a great topic because now we're talking about Judaism as a race. Whenever Muslims accuse people of being racist, people say Islam is not a race. You cannot be racist towards Muslims.
But Judaism
so
is.
Please
it's not the
tell
same.
me how Judaism.
So Judaism, if you're a Christian, Muslim, Hindu, it doesn't matter. If your mother is Jewish, you belong to the Jewish people and you're considered ethnically Jewish.
Can you not pick up a belief?
No, it's an ethnicity. We have diseases that are unique to us. I study my DNA. I have DNA with Jews from Ethiopia. We're a people. We're an ethnicity. There's also a religion which is tied into it, but we're an ethnicity. So when Jews talk about Jews being an ethnic minority, we mean exactly that. Just like you belong to an ethnic group, I too belong to an ethnic group. I don't deny you your ethnic group. I don't say that I don't know what your religion is, but I don't say you are this religion. I allow you to define yourself exactly as you wish.
Here, I'll repeat it again. Judaism, can someone pick up the belief tomorrow and say that they're Jewish.
No.
I'd like to disagree. I've seen
It
people
doesn't
do
matter.
it. I've seen people do it.
It doesn't matter
what you believe. No. Wait.
This is classic. You're now coming and defining to Jews what it is to be Jewish.
Just like people define what it is to be Muslim to other Muslims. So please spare me.
With Muslim.
Wait. No,
Listen.
I'm not jumping around, sir. I'm not jumping around. I'm using the logic debating
Okay,
tactics
so
that
if you
people
listen,
use.
I'll explain the difference.
Go on.
If any person here today takes the Shahada and says La ilaha illallah and then completes it, I will say they then become a Muslim. If someone says I believe the 5 books of Moses are true, they do not become Jewish. To become Jewish, you have to be accepted by the Jewish people. Just like to join a Native American tribe, you have to be accepted by the people. We're a people. Now you can try to redefine us, but we don't accept your definition.
Perfect. Where did Jews come from?
So my DNA goes back to Israel.
So where did Jews come from?
Well, so Abraham, who wasn't the first Jew but is considered to be the father of the Jews, came from Iraq. They then sojourned in Egypt, and then they came to Israel, and in Israel they became a people. Now my DNA is 3%, which is pretty lame, but 3% like from that region. I've got majority European DNA because I said I grew up in a white working class community. Most of my great grandparents are actually not Jewish, so I'm of mixed ethnicity, but I have distinct Jewish DNA, which you can run a DNA test on and identify that I'm a Jew and tie me to other Jews.
Now considering,
But can we come back to reparations?
Considering a lot of people would equate that we're all descendants of those original human beings.
No, not original human beings. They're not the original human beings.
Could people not go back, right, and say, yes, my ancestry came from Egypt as well? Were Jews not in Egypt?
Mate, you're getting really confused. I don't know where we're going with this conversation. But this is like, can we stay on topic?
Yes.
I'm just saying that the Jews...
You turned it into a race debate, so I addressed you. If you're going to say that I can address Jews as a race, you need to then give Muslims the same.
It's the equivalent. It's the equivalent of me saying, listen. It's the equivalent of me saying you're not black because you were born in Britain.
Anyway, we're talking about Jewish people, right? And they've been persecuted or whatever. Right? Were they not given reparations?
No, my family got nothing. My family was... No, listen, and I'll explain.
Whether or not your family got it, did the Jewish community get reparations from Europe due to the Holocaust?
I'll try and explain.
Go on.
If you can prove that you were personally lost property, like your family lost property, lost whatever,
Good.
deeds to property,
Good.
artwork that was stolen, then you can lay claim to that. My family came from a little peasant's village in Poland.
Good.
I visited there 3 years ago.
Yes.
Didn't know which house I came from. No way of making reparations because I'm not tied to that. I've got no proof that my family actually lived there.
So I'll ask you now, because it's a proof thing and we need to go back to ancestry, why have African Americans been denied reparations for so long? But the 1940s was only 50, 60 years ago. You got reparations then. Can you explain to me?
I'm trying to.
Go on.
So you said that and you pointed at me as a white man.
Oh, here we go. You're getting triggered over semantics. I can't really have a conversation if you're going to get triggered over semantics. I'm sorry. Insert European national. Sorry, go ahead.
Okay, so fine. That's what I was responding to. And it's the same issue with reparations because the majority of people that are white today did not benefit from slavery. They weren't slave owners. It was a small minority that actually owned slaves. And those slaving families, if they still have wealth today, then I would say yes, there is a legitimate case.
Absolutely brilliant.
So I would say there is a legitimate case for reparations against.
Now I want to ask quickly. I want to ask him quickly, right? Let's go quickly one question. Actually, go ahead because the dialogue is between me and him. So add your little point.
Just one question. You see, you went into the differences between DNA and everything. You see?
Between DNA?
Yes.
Yeah.
That you have a distinct DNA.
Yeah.
So suppose this gentleman here.
Yeah.
Suppose he's got a brother and he gets married, his brother gets married, and after 10 centuries, one of the bloodline says that they are distinctly different from the other, but when you go back, they were brothers and both of them had the same father. So you as a Jew, you must believe that God created Adam and Eve. Do you not believe in that?
Exactly. Okay,
and everybody comes from Adam.
We believe in evolution.
Yeah, so
Most Jews believe in evolution.
So everybody comes from Adam and Eve. So how does that make you distinctly different from him or me or anybody else?
So if you want to deny that ethnic groups don't exist, because we all come from a
You
common
have-
ancestor.
You have to prove that because from what I
No,
know,
there are different ethnic groups.
There's I think it's the 6 different phenotypes of human beings come from the African continent. They cannot be found anywhere else.
So then-
meaning that.
When you say
different
reparations,
groups-
you don't mean that
different
white people who
different
descend from
groups-
Africa can have
different groups.
reparations.
You're talking about white and black.
No,
Doesn't
no,
really
no,
matter
I-
because the original people that came here were black anyway, according to some
okay,
people. So wait.
It's really difficult. I find this really difficult. Can I just?
You can't keep up. That's
No,
not
I
my
can keep
problem.
up. You're jumping around. He's trying to say that there's no such thing as ethnicities because we all have a common
He's right,
ancestor.
he's right.
And he's just said true. You're trying to say that ethnic groups exist and certain ones are owed reparations because of the hardship that's been inflicted on them by other ethnic groups. So you're saying two contradictory things. So I'm saying, which point am I addressing? His or yours?
Perfect. If you want to address this point, I'm practically fine. But if you want to address both our points, I'm very happy to do
But
that.
they're
as well.
contradictory.
I'm very happy to
They
do that. as
can't
well.
coexist.
So even if they were related, Americans, white Americans and African Americans, they were separated based on what? Skin color.
So you're
That's
saying
an ethnicity.
I
Let
agree.
me finish.
There are
Let me
ethnic
finish.
groups. He's
Let
saying there
me
isn't.
finish. Let me finish.
If you want to argue that, argue that. If you want to argue with me, we'll deal with ethnic groups.
Well, I'm trying to address the fact that you say that no one is under any kind of repression right now, and that we all have an equal chance at everything.
I said in the UK there's no institutional racism.
I'm trying to address the fact that you have been allowed and you have had the privilege to build that fundamental foundation that would allow you to acquire wealth.
And you haven't.
Black
You
people
keep on
have
saying
not.
you.
Black
You
people
keep
have
saying
not.
you. Change your language.
They have. They have.
Change your
There are
language.
many
They have-
rich
So-
black people as well, brother.
Can you explain to me? Can you explain to me? White servants that came over from Ireland, right, worked for 5 to 7 years, and then they were allowed land. You have 200 million people who work for free. Where's the land?
Are you talking about America or the UK?
For sure. About the past.
Are you talking about America?
No, but the thing is,
Are you talking about America or the UK? Because
let's not forget the past, because I
Are you
know,
talking about
for you
America or
guys,
the UK?
it's
America's
flattering.
racist. America is racist. Are we talking about the UK or America?
Yeah.
You have to
This
set
is the thing.
the
This is the thing.
about
As
here.
soon as
You can't jump around.
As soon as
founder
As soon as
the
this is the thing.
Englishman.
This is the
What are you
thing.
talking about?
As
We
soon
need
as
an American here to
here we
discuss
go.
this. We
As
don't
soon
have
as
an
you bring,
American
as soon as you bring a fundamental reason and an example of people who have been denied wealth, you then say, "Oh no, the UK. Sorry, not gonna
We were
happen
talking
today."
about Bethnal Green.
You started talking
We
about
were
white
talk-
Jews for some reason, so why are you setting the standards now to say that I
No,
can
no, I'm
talk
talking about
X, Y, and
British
Z?
people. We're talking about Britain. Is Britain
So
institutionally?
I will ask you again. I will ask you again. If we're going to keep it to that, because you
Yeah.
clearly cannot keep your footing, I will ask you again. Bethnal Green. I lived in Bethnal Green. It was a majority-minority place. Those minorities got moved to Bow, which is Zone 2, whereas Bethnal Green was near enough to Zone 1. You go back to Bethnal Green, it is majority British people, British white
So
people.
let's just fact
So
check
I will
that.
ask. Go ahead. Say that again? Oh no, the price, the rent prices went up, and then obviously Bow was cheaper, and then as you go along,
Gentrified.
that's the thing. We're trying to talk about gentrification, but he doesn't believe gentrification exists.
No, I do, but I don't believe it's by race. It's by middle class. No.
Gentrification doesn't exist.
Gentrification exists, but it's on class, not
I
race.
don't think they got land.
Wealth, not class. Wealth. Thank you.
The agreement was, though, at the end of it, the 7 years service paid for their passage over to America. So the thing is, they worked for 7 years, and then
Do I know about India?
Absolutely. And
What about India?
No, that's fair enough. But when we talk about like you said,
I can't hear.
the land debate in
Okay.
particular, right? When we talk about the land debate, it took black people until the 1969, no, it was the 1964 to even get votes. When do you think they were able to buy land before that?
1864.
1860 was like the abolition of slavery. So I don't think they would have given it. They wouldn't have given it the night after.
America is a racist place today. I just got back from New York.
No, but
It's
the thing
massively
is-
divided.
but-
Bethnal Green, majority community is Bangladeshi today. Stamford Hill is Muslim and Jewish. It's like, and would you say that the Jews that live in Bangladesh, sorry, not Bangladesh, in Stamford Hill, are they white? Are they, and are they? And so, have they moved you out, or have you moved into this area? 28. Okay, and so has there been any gentrification there?
They broke up because they picked this down hill and they don't intermix.
Can I?
But you're not Jewish, you can't really go into.
Can I add exactly? How is that allowed? How is that allowed?
You can't.
No, I just wanted to add. How is that allowed?
How is what allowed?
How is Jewish rule allowed within Stamford Hill?
It's not.
It is.
It's not. Anyone.
They have courts. They have Jewish courts in Stamford Hill. Please, you're Jewish. You should know this.
Okay, so you
But
quote a
can I
religious
ask a question?
court.
Can I ask a question?
A religious court.
We have a big problem. We have a big problem with people who don't want Sharia law in this country. So can I ask, why is it two different rules for Jewish and Muslims?
I wondered about that.
It's a completely.
There is laws. They have their own police.
I agree
They have
with
their
you.
own establishments. They have their own infrastructures.
Okay, can I respond?
They don't have their own police. They have private security
They don't
guards.
have
That's what
police.
Muslims are asking for. They're being
Muslims have private
but they're
security
not
guards.
involved.
If you
But
go
they're
to Regent's Park Mosque, there's private security guards.
Getting someone from FFS or whatever company it is that supplies security guard is not Sharia law.
What?
Please do not conflate Sharia law
Mate,
to getting
what are you
someone
talking-
who's a thing.
I've spent 10 years building relations between Jews and Muslims. I have no issue with Islam. I have no issue with Sharia courts. I have no issue with the Beit Din, which you're talking about.
They don't know that the Jews in Stamford Hill run on their own courts, especially for
It's
civil,
called a Beit Din.
especially for civil.
I just
especially
told
for
you
civil.
what it's called. Of course I know.
Beit Din.
It's called a Beit Din. And what it does, it officiates marriages. It officiates whether someone is Jewish or not. If people have certain disputes within that community, they can go, which is completely legal, just as it is with a Sharia court. I have no issue with a Sharia court.
So have you raised any voices about that?
Yes.
Yeah.
I just told you, I run a charity, JudaismIslam.com, which promotes better rights for Muslims in the UK.
Can you now explain as to why you are allowed that privilege?
Muslims are not, they are. They are allowed. There are Sharia courts all over the country. How do you think Muslims go officiate their religion?
Sharia courts in order
They're all over.
Can you give me an example?
So there's one in Regent's Court, Regent's Mosque, they've got a Sharia court. They're all over the country.
It's something that we can substantiate.
So they're avoiding all the tangents. Coming back to reparation. So Bethnal Green.
Reparations for what?
Mate, what's your name?
We're talking about reparations for how Jewish people got reparations for the Holocaust. Now he's saying that obviously ancestrally they were able to tie their ancestors back to the Holocaust, hence why they got.
No, to the property that was stolen.
She was able to prove that I think it's something like the BBC made a documentary about. She was able to reclaim a property worth 30 million euros that belonged to her parents, her grandparents.
So I'll ask
So if they
but they can. But the thing is, African Americans
I
can.
don't know. So if they can, maybe they should be able to. I don't know.
My point is, if you can say that my ancestor worked on this plantation,
I don't know if individual
worked on this plantation, and that plantation or that family
saying I don't
still
know.
has a massive
I'm not
wealth,
saying-
then I think there's a legitimate claim for reparations there. But if you're saying that some working class peasant from the north of England owes money when they had no part to play in slavery, they were peasants, they were oppressed, they've never had affluence, they don't owe reparations.
We have Windrush. We have Windrush right now. We have Jamaican people who came
Which is
from
terrible.
Jamaica. Who brought,
Which is terrible.
wait. Who were brought from Jamaica over here to build the UK.
With the
now,
promise of citizenship, yeah.
How did black people get to Jamaica?
So 100%.
How did black people get to Jamaica?
They were so.
No, but you gave me an example of a UK person. I'm giving you an example of a UK black person who has the legitimate grounds of reparation.
Let me explain. Let me answer. So most blacks that went to Jamaica were sold by either blacks, whites, Christians, Jews, Muslims.
I'll answer that as well.
No. They were sold. They were then taken on slave ships in the most horrendous conditions. Tens of millions shipped to Jamaica, South Africa, South America. South America had more slaves than anywhere else. These are terrible, dark periods of man's history. No one's like. I'm not arguing that.
I don't think I ever asserted that you were saying that.
No.
it was okay.
So you asked how they got to Jamaica, and I just explained how they got to Jamaica. And then they were promised work here, promised citizenship here, and they were screwed over by the British government.
Before we even go to that, right? American Constitution actually states that all men are born equal. So whether or not they were born, no,
they redefine
that's
what a
your
man is.
Constitution. Sorry,
No, I'm saying.
that's Constitution.
And
Sorry.
at the same time, they had slavery.
But this
It was
one right
BS.
here,
They were
even-
saying this is a man and this isn't. They
Ah,
were
right.
racist.
Doesn't matter. Even if they said this is man and this is not.
Yeah,
I know.
yeah.
I understand you're agreeing with me, but I'm trying to clarify.
You just so want to disagree with everything, even when we agree, you disagree.
No. Because when we talk about, they said that this was man and this wasn't. America was well aware of what Africans were capable of. They knew knew what Africans were capable of. They were capable of more than Europeans. So for them to say,
by more?
have you got pyramids? Have you got anything that any empires that go back 30, 40,000 years?
So it depends how you trace Europeans.
No. But I'm just saying in particular. When you're talking about people as subhuman,
No one's talking about
no,
them as
not you. But you just said that's what America said in order to justify it, right?
Yeah, but then you said they're better, and I'm saying they're not. So it's like, you're not better than me, I'm not better than you.
That's fair enough. If you want to take semantic offence, that's you. That's not me. I'm trying to have.
That's not semantic offence. You just said that the people who were taken on slave ships were superior, and I'm saying no, not we're equal.
I'm going by their rhetoric. Their rhetoric is that they were better because of the establishments and all the infrastructure that they built in comparison to Africans. Well, that's what they claimed. What I'm trying to say is that they knew much better because they had seen the previous kingdoms of the African continent. So they were bullshitting from the beginning. So again, when we talk about the constitution and they say that every man is equal, even whether or not they want to lie about whether they think black people are subhuman or not, doesn't matter because they have the evidence to prove otherwise. So when we're talking about the constitution, it is unconstitutional for them to afford the rights that they give to every other white person, not to the black people, whether or not they were sold into
talking
slavery.
about back then or today?
No, because I
Are you talking about back then or today?
I'm talking about back then.
Yeah, I agree. Back then was a horrible race. It's like I don't know what we're arguing about.
No, because my point is, there are certain people, right, whether it's black or not, that have been disallowed certain privileges that other people have, allowing them to build foundations for them to set better wealth for their later legacies. What I'm trying to say to you is that some people are having a conversation to basically better the situation and make sure that these people can be
Okay, cool.
Let's forget about everyone else.
I would like to ask you some questions if I can.
Okay, I'll ask one question.
It's very.
What privilege do you have? Do I have that you don't?
What?
What privilege do I have that you
Benefit of
don't?
the doubt. What do you mean? Benefit of the doubt.
That's a completely subjective.
No, it is very subjective. No, it is very subjective.
You can never prove
I'll
that.
give you an example. The police disproportionately, I was talking to a gentleman about this earlier, search minorities more than they do white people. Why is that?
So if you go to where I come from, the north of England, they disproportionately search white working class people than people of colour or people from different ethnic groups.
It's true. But I'm asking about here.
You're asking about London, so I'm saying it's completely relative to where you live. And it's what you were talking about before, because you were talking that, unfortunately, and that is a reality, some of the most impoverished neighbourhoods in London are not majority white, and that I agree
so
with.
I'll ask, if we're talking about the north of England and so on, so say Scotland in particular, people keep saying it's one of the worst capitals in the UK. The UN recognises it as a sole capital of Europe, right?
So what capital of Europe?
Sole capital of Europe.
I'm Scottish, by the way.
Yeah.
Sorry to hear that.
Roger.
I like Scotland.
It is what it is. Poverty.
No, I know. It's an interesting.
That's my point, and that was my point coming back to the beginning.
Can you name me a Scottish person that has died under police care?
Because it's not a subject I follow, I can't. But I'm sure
understandably, but
I'm sure if I go on the
I'm
internet.
telling you.
I'm sure if I go on the internet now, I can find many Scotsmen.
Are you sure?
Yeah, I would imagine.
But what's your
so.
argument? Is your argument that there's racist police that kill the black people in cuffs
The
or
Met
whatever?
Police chief said himself, there's institutionalized racism in the Met Police. I'll give you another example. Stephen Lawrence, when he got murdered, was he doing anything to provoke the murder? No, he just got murdered. He got murdered, right?
Wrong colour, which is definitely not the wrong colour, but that's how they perceive it.
Can we justify why a mole was put into the family to watch the family?
The police was institutionally racist. They did a huge investigation, and it was found, and they did a huge drive to bring black police officers into this.
If you cannot trust the establishment that is there to protect you, in particular, right? What makes you think you can trust the rest of the establishment?
Okay, so I'll give you an example because I'm Jewish and I don't trust the. Did you know in discrimination cases, a Jew has never won a discrimination case in English law against a non-Jew, and this includes someone who went to an interview and the interviewer said outright, "I will not employ Jews." The guy got up and walked out, and the tribunal judge said, "There's no case here because you voluntarily terminated the interview. There's no discrimination." Right?
It might be technically correct.
I'm not being rude, but no, don't get me wrong.
I can see from a legal point of view.
If he had stayed, and this is just from a legal practice, if he had stayed, would that not have gone further?
Okay, but what I'm saying,
so that's very different. When you're talking,
I'm just giving an example.
Yeah, I'm just giving you. I'm telling. Sorry, go ahead.
Because you can see that's a clear whether legally it's entirely, there's a case, whether there's a case to give it a buzz, but it's a clear case. I think most people say it's a clear case of racism, and the guy has obviously suffered. And I wouldn't expect anybody of any minority to sit through that. So. The thing is, there's I would say that as a Jew, I don't trust the authorities.
I will apply the same amount of ridicule. I will apply the same amount of ridicule that people come and receive when they get these cases. If he had gone further, right, would it have not been in the judge's legal interest and duty to pursue that case? What can the judge do if a person terminates their procedure, right? The judicial procedure, right? What can the judge do if the person terminates it out of their own free will? You cannot say that that's the system doing it, because the individual chose to come out himself, and that's the same kind of ridicule you would apply to people of color.
No, but you could say that he's been discriminated.
But when you're taking
because it was clear to him that he wasn't going to get the job.
Of course, I understand. But when you're taking up court against people who, in particular, are already discriminatory against you, is it not then in your knowledge that you're going up against people who don't really have your best interests at heart? So you're going to hear probably the worst of the worst.
Can I just cut to the chase? Do us three owe you two reparations?
Well, it depends. When we're talking about it depends, we're talking about, were you from European colonies that destabilized Africa?
This is what I was saying. So I was saying some instances I think reparations are owed.
It's a lot more nuanced.
No, so I'm asking you because you seem to disagree with what I was saying. So I just want to know what you're saying.
When we talk about reparations, right? Don't think about we're talking about let's go to the bank and let's go get a 50 right now and you can buy me Mac D's, right? We're talking about, can you set back, right, the stabilized societies, and there were stabilized societies. Yes, they had inter-tribal wars and whatever going on, but everywhere does. But not to the degree that is set now, where we have genocides. Can you name me a genocide before the colonial period?
I don't think that's much of a legitimate argument.
No, I understand.
Genocides all over the world for all of human history.
You'd have to prove that to me for Africa.
Well, so I would see the argument's a little bit unreasonable.
I'll give you one that's close
did to each other.
No, I understand, but the thing is, we have records of European wars against each other. And
but you also don't have a record of if I understand things correctly, because there's only one African nation that had written language.
Of course.
So
there's not only one. There's many places. There's many places that wrote down. But there's a lot of people who did talk about it orally. But there's a lot of people that did write it down, and it's not just them. The Europeans that did come. I understand, but the Europeans that did come along as well did note about the societies that were in function and were in place.
Right.
So these are not things that we've just.
No, I'm not saying they're made up.
We're getting sidetracked.
I'm saying
absolutely. What I'm trying to
Reparations.
say is, when we're talking about reparations, we're talking about helping Africa to stabilize itself so that it can carry on, right? When we're talking about all of
So you're not talking about you're talking about the
we're talking
African
about the
continent.
Because
okay, you're talking about Morocco?
Say that again?
You're talking about Morocco?
You're talking about current Morocco?
No, Morocco today.
When we're talking
Berber majority Morocco today. Are you talking about Morocco? Or are you talking about Egypt? So again, you just have to be more.
If you want to be pedantic, I can do this all day. I can do this all day. No problem. When we're talking about Morocco, are you talking about the Moroccans who were there beforehand? Like, because that part of Africa, which is up there, is in like North Africa or whatever, has gone through quite the distinct period of invasion. So you would then have to prove, like you said earlier, that certain people have ties to X, Y, and Z.
The Moroccans the Moroccans of today were more likely to be slavers than to be enslaved. That's right. That's why I'm asking you, you said Africa.
But you're acting like you're alone in this. Of course, we'd ask them as well for reparations to places that they have.
No, I'm not talking about. I'm literally saying when you say reparations are owed, who are they owed to, and who has to give it to them? That's all I'm asking.
You want to go through the intricate
just
No, because that's all your arguments are based on. You're asking me to go through the intricate details of everything.
Okay,
and when I do,
pick one tribe or one country,
no worries.
And one plantation, like whatever it takes, just so I can understand your point.
Does anyone want to have? Haiti.
Okay.
Haiti had to pay 21 billion in reparations to France. because they lost their property in slaves. Can you please tell me why?
So I don't know. So can you tell me? I don't know about this. So can you explain it to me?
Haiti, basically was almost like the fire that started the revolution that basically ended slavery. Because of their rebellions, 1806.
Something like
You had Toussaint Louis Vuitton, and you had the guy from, I don't know if you saw Birth of a Nation recently. It's alright, it's a good film. But you have these people who fought off their slave masters because they felt the way they were being treated did not meet human rights. And the person leading it knew this as well. So they managed to get the slavers off the island to the point where it wasn't just them, it was them and the Polish as well. They considered themselves brothers. They called the Polish blacks from then on. They were then threatened by the French army with another invasion, with military force and the Spanish, if they didn't pay the reparations. Now, please tell me, how were they made to pay reparations in a post-abolitionist world where slavery shouldn't exist?
That's horrendous.
But this is what I'm talking about. When we talk about reparations and we talk about...
So that's what I'm saying. I'm saying where there are cases, so that's an instance where there should be reparations paid to the Haitians.
But this is what I'm trying to say. When we talk about this, it's a lot more nuanced. And like you say, we just go through the facts, we go through the ancestry, we go through where you were in the plantation, who was the plantation leader, look at their wealth.
I think we agree.
It's very nuanced. Yeah, it's very nuanced. But the thing is, I do have to say.
So someone's descended from a slave.
Well, surely the state is held accountable as well, because the state allowed the practices to happen. And this is why some people say that supposedly Martin Luther King was killed. Conspiracy. They say that he was planning to take a case against the state for allowing slavery to happen, even though it's unconstitutional. So, when people do bring up these points about reparations, I don't necessarily have a problem if people have a countering point. But my problem is, why does it come from a place of hurt and heart, as if we're accusing you, when there is so much more of a nuanced stance that we can take it from? Like I said, well, we spent this whole conversation.
No, but I think actually if we just stopped and listened to
course,
each other,
we would have disagreed.
I said from the beginning, like, if there were plantations and families that have wealth, which was made on the back of African slaves or slaves from anywhere, it doesn't matter whether, then reparations should be paid. You gave an example of Haiti, which I think is actually where there's clearly
probably
an
one of the most concrete ones, but like the other ones are a little bit more nuanced.
which I completely agree with. I think my response was when you looked at me and my skin colour and were using the language "you," and that's why I wanted to clarify, because my family died in the Holocaust and they weren't slavers.
That is fair enough. And when we talk about white supremacy in particular, I would love to change that word, because I don't think it like reflects all white people in particular. Because there were working class white people that had it just as shit, if not even worse, during the dark ages, of Europe, right?
One of the things that
But I was just going to say, when we talk about these things, these powers could not, because bear in mind, this is 1%, a very low minority, right, who are keeping the power established. Why were people complicit in that? Why were people complicit, basically, in that kind of subjugation of other human beings?
Because people were horrible.
Or that they didn't have the power to change.
Ultimately, they weren't, because America fought the Civil War.
Say that again?
Ultimately, they weren't complicit in it.
America fought the Civil War because, again, we can talk. Yeah, it was not that. Like,
Well, I wasn't only slavery, but that was
Abraham Lincoln had
believe me,
slaves.
if, like I said, America just wanted to stop wars. I think the practice of they wanted to stop the practice of slavery in the North. That's it. They didn't want to stop the practice of slavery in the South. That's not the thing. But the South wanted to extend that from the South to the North, and that's why they went to war. Had nothing to do with like abolishing slavery or getting rid of whatever. So when people talk about the civil,
abolitionists on the
they were abolitionists. But again, this is one of those things. They were in the minority voice. But the only thing is, I do have to say, we have to respect that. We have to respect that they were abolitionists.
Can I ask a
I don't like
serious
when
question?
people don't.
Can I ask? Because we always talk about like white privilege from whites benefiting from slavery, but the biggest slavers of all were the Arabs. The Ottoman Empire's legacy is Turkey. Is there any movement to get reparation?
If you look, I was going to say, if you do talk to people in this park, there is a very vocal voice, basically talking to Arab people about whether or not we need to have a talk about reparations, and that is going on. This idea that we're just asking just Europeans for reparations is not completely a thing.
It's like the Europeans were actually the first to abolish slavery. Slavery still exists in Africa today, in Mauritania and places like that.
Haiti was the first to abolish slavery,
Okay, fine.
and then further on. So even that, I can't agree with that. I can't agree with that because it's again painting history.
What were the dates? Because
1806.
didn't the French abolish slavery in France, and it was illegal
before 1806.
Yes, yeah, long ago.
I'll have a look.
Yeah,
I'll have a
I
look.
thought so, but it's
maybe
definitely
not-
it's not my area of
No,
expertise.
but then why Haiti?
But maybe not in the French Empire.
Because Haiti is a French. Haiti is
Maybe
a
they
French
abolished.
colony.
It's possible they abolished it in France, but not within the
outside
empire.
of
But that's just silly. That's like saying.
Anyway, like,
you know what I mean? Anyway,
I'd like to ask you some questions. 'Cause
Whoa, yeah, go
I've been
ahead.
waiting for a while. So let's see where to start. Now, I'm not entirely sure about what you think. I wasn't here from the start,
No,
so
it's cool.
I'd like to know. I just got second-hand combo from these guys, which is fine.
Yeah.
But I want to ask you a couple of things. So we're talking about reparations now. One of the things that comes to me as really pertinently dangerous
Of course.
is whether or not you are advocating for. Let's imagine that my ancestors had slaves. I'm going to be held accountable for their actions. How is that legitimate for you? Something that is nothing I have done, an action that has not been committed by me.
Yeah.
I am therefore responsible.
Absolutely.
It's like collective punishment, but
Absolutely.
through the ages. It
Absolutely.
seems like a deadly thing to get into, man. Because the next point I want to raise, and then I'll stop for a
Yeah,
second,
go ahead, man.
is
Sorry.
this. This is a real critical one, man, because human history, if you study it, as you probably have, is brutality, violence, slavery, genocide, insanity. That is human history, and I would argue of all cultures, right? Now, where do you stop? Who's oppressing who? Some are more recent, some are from the past. Different cultures have been attacking, oppressing, invading, enslaving, non-stop through all of history. So where do you stop, man? He owes to you, you owe to him, that woman owes to her.
I think you owe me.
Right? You understand?
Yeah, no. So when we talk about, like you said,
I owe
there's a
nothing.
I thought that was a great
there is a
question, by the way.
continuous kind of like atrocity historically
Right.
as we go back and back.
So that's what I'm saying. It's real
But-
dangerous, this argument, man.
But this is why I like that we were talking about in a legal sense as well, because the state can be held accountable, the American state, for not following its own constitution.
But what does that
So-
translate to? It translates to taxation of the people and therefore collective punishment and
Wait,
payment.
wait, wait. I was gonna say when we talk about reparations, it's not as simple as we get money back. That's
So what do
because
you
you
want?
need to quantify. You need to quantify, and then you need to take into account that taking money out like that will bring a society down. It will basically like damage it forever.
Yeah, not to
kind of
mention
thing.
resentment.
But that's why exactly. But that is why there are steps put. Like people say, affirmative action is one of the steps, right? It's mainly benefits white women. You can look at the statistics, but these are like the steps that we can take, very gradual steps in benefiting certain people and getting into certain areas, and then very slowly we will reach a point where everything is represented and everyone doesn't feel like they were blocked from certain career paths or certain kind of opportunities because of their historical context.
Right.
Now, when we talk about like the historical continuity of like how fucked up the human race is.
Right.
When we're talking about slavery in particular, I love when people do talk about slavery in Africa, because the only documents that actually, or the only reports that actually talk about slavery in Africa, not the slavery necessarily of selling the slaves to the Europeans, because that was a business model different to itself, but the slavery beforehand, they basically termed it not slavery but servitude, right? Oftentimes it was people who were political war prisoners, basically, right? And what would happen is that they would then serve a time in prison. They would then be free, and then they would then be allowed to work to get their own land, to become a citizen, to be able to
Is that
vote,
in every
and
single
to be able
African
to.
tribe?
Again, I'm not going to say yes, but that's the only records that I know of so far. That's what I'm trying to say.
Because that sounds a very specific
Yeah, it
system
does,
that
it
would have
does.
been
Of
applied in
course.
one region at one time.
More civilized places, yeah. But the ones that we do have, again, you're allowed to marry into the family, right? Now, I understand, obviously, in a war situation, you cannot, it's one of those things, it's a testament to his humanity that even back then, you knew that you could not just mercilessly hack war criminals or war prisoners, as they call them. So they actually found a productive system of integrating these people into their society and allowing them freedoms of rights the same way everyone else did. So when you compare that to the European system of you are just subhuman, that is it. There's no way for you to better your position or better your circumstance. How do you compare them to as similar, if you know what I mean, in atrocities?
We're kind of taking your word that this was a
No, of course,
universal
of course, of
practice.
course, of course, of course.
To
But from
track
what I've
this in history, that's the problem.
Of course. But from what I've learned, this is what I've heard of African practice. They've actually said that most Europeans would not recognize it as slavery.
This is
Like
the
what we
this is
consider
the
slavery is very different.
but
Like if you go into, like, for example, what's called slavery slavery in the Bible.
Say that again?
You know, in the Bible he talks about
Yeah,
slavery.
yeah, yeah,
So if you go into this like
It's not true, it's a tangent because that's Jewish slaves, so let's not go there. The laws are completely different for non-Jewish slaves.
But what I'm saying
yeah.
is that, but there's a principle that recognises that the economic conditions. If someone owed money, they could go and work for someone. Of course, you know, as opposed to the situation now where people have got means and
Of course,
borrowing money.
That's what they initially called
The
services.
danger of this
Go on.
conversation is there are huge generalizations made,
Of course.
either on people today or people historically.
Or it's
So you
impossible.
use the language like
Wonderful.
Africa,
It's big, yeah, of course, it's big.
It's a vast land with many different tribes. You've got Arabs in the north who invaded and conquered.
But it-
How they kept the slaves was much worse than the Europeans. They would castrate them and do all kinds, and much bigger slave trade than the Europeans as well. Most people don't realise. And so we make these generic statements like Africa had no history of this until white Europeans came, but
just not
history
accurate.
is like so much more vast than that.
The only thing I'll give you that, obviously, with oral, it's really hard to authenticate whether or not it's true. But at the same time, paper can be plagiarized as well.
That's
So,
right, but
yeah,
maybe the whole
but
thing
it's
is-
a
maybe
lot,
the whole
it's a
thing
lot
isn't
more
worth it.
authentic, in my opinion. It's definitely a lot more
If you
authentic.
look at what they're doing
But-
in Uganda and places like that today, like it's barbaric. So to assume that
problem
for
is-
all of history it was like just completely civilized, and then there was this
Yeah.
But the
degeneracy.
problem- I understand. But
I
the-
don't. Yeah, I don't see that as a legitimate argument saying that Africa degenerated because of the influence of Europe. Obviously, it can have very large negative effects, but I think it would be ridiculous to say that it was the perfect society beforehand.
Of course. But the only,
Absurd.
Okay, fair enough. I'll give you an example. When we look at historical, we're trying to find like an authenticity of whether or not a civilization was civilized. Yes.
Well, I just want to have a better society today, man.
Yeah, fair enough.
Without negatively, without saying you have to pay this guy this because of your ancient ancestors.
I don't. Again, it's
Maybe
one of
that
those.
happened. Maybe it happened.
Again, personally, I'm not one of those who's asking for reparations, but I know the argument behind it.
Sure.
And when I talk to people who are against it, I do find a lot of the times they haven't taken the time to look into it. They just come from a very offensive point of view. Not offensive as in I'm offended, kind of like very defense offense kind of point of view.
Can I
Now,
ask
when
some-
we're talking about, like you say, civilizations, civilizations that are constantly under war, under degeneracy, under kind of like civil unrest,
Like Europe.
cannot build.
like Europe.
Yes.
Like Europe for all of its
Europe,
history.
yes,
Endless war.
yes. And what did they build? They didn't
Many-
build. They didn't
many-
build
I would argue many things, but I mean,
built
I'm
one
not,
of the
not
greatest
so interested in that
civilizations
argument.
mankind has known.
now, or you talking about back when?
But even back then, I
What
mean,
can you attest? What can you attest?
Roman
to?
Empire.
the
There's
Roman
dark
Empire,
impressions,
Greek Empire.
Yeah. Also about
like
the Greeks.
the Greeks
Where
conquered
did they
most
get
of the
their
world.
teachings from?
The
Where did
Greeks
they
or
get their
the
teachings
Romans?
from? The Greeks.
The Greeks, they came up with a lot of original ideas. They also borrowed from those that came before them,
Many of them went to Egypt to learn.
and that's fine. I'm
They got that information.
The Greeks were in
and that
Egypt, yeah,
practice, and that
absolutely,
practice
from
from an
the
older
Egyptian-
society. No, but what I'm trying to say is they got
Maybe we're
that
getting to the
practice.
code of your views then, man.
Yeah.
Are you saying that they're better?
No. It's not about better because
what is it
it's,
then?
it's kind of like evolution, right? Just because someone moves out to a different part of the community and gets advantageous features, does that make them better or better adapted to that specific thing?
Well, I just don't
So
see
when
how
I'm
you're
talking
saying
about-
that the
when I'm talking
developments
about-
of Europe are fraudulent.
No, they're not
People
fraudulent.
take influence from everywhere.
No, but that's the problem. That's the problem. You see it
not
as
a problem,
fraudulent
that's-
instead of you seeing it as growing off other people. You seem to
Maybe
wanna,
we're saying the
No,
same
no,
thing
but what I'm
again.
trying to say is
Maybe we are.
I think we're
I
all
don't
saying
agree.
we're standing on the shoulders of those that came before us.
Yeah.
No, it's not even about standing shoulders. It's literally about someone learned something progressive, right? If your neighbor knows that, you know what, you can get clean water from the spring down there, why is he not going to tell you?
No, I agree. We're in agreement
Is
again.
that neighbor then better than you because he found a spring over there that with clean water?
No.
No, it's about passing on
But you
the
were saying that
information.
Europeans didn't have good
Yeah.
civilizations.
No.
and we were
I'm saying,
that they were great.
I'm saying they suffered a stall, especially with the Dark Ages, and especially with again a lot of, whether or not you agree, a lot of religious like fanaticism in general. And what I'm trying to say is, can you give me an example of anything that is as significant as the Benin Empire? Or the Egyptian Empire, or the Nubian, or the
So I would
Muslim.
say the Industrial Revolution's a great example,
And
which
when-
is
when
advanced.
was that?
That was a few years ago.
Where did the minerals come from?
The minerals.
The resources, the
Most of the resources from the Industrial Revolution actually came from Europe, or an awful lot of them. So you have
the
cotton
coal was
mills up and
depleted.
coal mine. I come from a mining community.
But you're missing.
And when-
I think you're missing a
But a lot
subtext of
but a lot
what he's saying.
to be fair, a lot of the money for the that people had to fund inventors came from people that made their money out of slavery.
Plantations, yeah, cane, sugar,
So
cotton, and
the
stuff
money
like that,
to
yeah.
invest in those
And I was
ideas
gonna say, when we're talking
are
about
surplus.
when we're talking about that, no one's taken away from the fact that these things were built because they gave us everything that we have today. But the problem is, when was the Industrial Revolution? 1918, sorry, 1800s. We're talking about civilizations that are 40, 30,000 years old, and they had systems of politics, philosophy, and
That's fine, but that's what all the Muslims
What
say.
I'm trying
Here's
to-
what the Jews
is
say.
that-
We all
no.
go back to our things and say, look how
not
great
right.
we were.
No, it's not about
the
great.
Earth that old? I don't think
What
It's
is
not
it?
about
Only
great.
6,000
It's
years
about
old.
nowadays how certain rhetoric has seen certain people as below
Right,
certain
okay,
people.
so that's what you're
and
saying.
how
Right, okay. I like to get there now. I agree. Maybe that some people, maybe that perspective is fronted and it's obviously not legit. And it doesn't serve anyone to even say it.
Yeah.
Even if it was the case, what benefit do you have of saying that to
yeah,
the world?
yeah, of course. There
I
you
agree
go.
with you.
There you go. Yeah.
I think it might be, and maybe I can't understand your perspective entirely
no worries,
for
no worries.
legitimate reasons, but I think it's a bit dangerous to
But
say
where does the
Europeans
danger
didn't
come-
have any civilization.
No,
It's
I'm
the
not
case.
saying Europeans did not have any civilization because I still believe in the whole idea that Europeans came from Africa. So for
Oh,
me
yeah,
to
for
say,
sure.
for
I'm
me
a-
to
I'm
say
a
that,
biologist.
yeah, for me to say that, I'm still
Evolution.
insulting myself,
Right.
Because the Europeans are my ancestors.
Okay,
Oh,
so
not officially, but like by relation, they are my ancestors.
if we all
So
had a common ancestor,
if-
it originated
yeah.
in Africa. That's the thing.
Yeah.
And okay, there we go.
That's fair enough. But again, we're talking.
You could say that the common ancestors originated in China or the US. Or
I've heard about it. Yeah,
And
exactly.
there's also
What's the
ancient Chinese civilization was phenomenal
Of course.
and equally on par with
Oh,
ancient.
probably more. Apparently,
Just
they were
why
quite. They were
does the
quite.
common ancestor being in Africa do anything
The ancient
about
Greeks
it?
invented the steam
It's
engine.
basically we're talking about how historically, when we're talking about stuff like slavery, people use the rhetoric to say that Africans were subhuman.
Yeah, that's what he's saying.
So when you say that, but you know the history,
Then you're dissing
your
yourself.
life, it's disingenuous.
Can I ask
And then on top of that, when you have a constitution that says all men are born equal, but you disallow benefits for certain people, how are you doing that?
Yeah, but
Can I ask the most controversial question I'll ever ask on camera, and I'm going to regret asking it the minute I say it.
Go ahead, bro.
It's not said from a
why
place of
we're
mind. I would argue that yourself, an individual who's gone to university, grown up,
Dropped out first year.
but you clearly come across as very intelligent, very educated. I don't know where you live, I'm not going to make assumptions, but you're in London, it's not cheap to live here. Arguably has a better life than many Africans that live in sub-Saharan Africa today. And so there's an argument that I would ask, and it's not coming from a place of malice at all, it's just to
Oh, of course,
understand.
of course, man.
So when people talk about reparations, is there an argument to say that by definition of being here, that in itself is about, and it's horrible how Africans came to be in America and Europe, but by the fact they're there, their life is immeasurably better than it may have been. We can't say because we don't know what the impact
We
would have
never
been on
know,
those
yeah, of
people
course.
living there. They could have built up an incredible civilization.
We don't know anything
But
could
so,
have happened.
is there an argument to say that that in itself is a form of reparation? Like, because your life is incredible.
Of course. Now, again, that would then go on.
I told you I was going to regret saying that. It's not coming from
That's fine,
any
that's fine,
I
that's
don't see it.
translation.
I don't see it as heavily
That's fine.
controversial. Seems logical.
That's fine. It's the kind of thing that basically makes me wonder, why am I privileged to be here? It's a question of, why is there a question of me being here in the first place? When you historically have enjoyed the fruits of being able to travel across the world and lay civilizations, civilizations without any form of payment, right? There are many Europeans that settled on African coasts with no problem. Now, can you give me an example? Can you give me an example of how Africans have been able to do the same, or do we have to go through the systems that you allocate to us?
But what's the
I don't-
cause
I
of that?
don't-
Huh?
But I don't see where you're going with it.
So what I'm trying to say is,
Technological development at different rates, or
No,
whatever.
it's not even about technological developments.
Okay, what is
even
it?
with technological developments, you can still say, you know what, we don't have a border policy, which Africa did not have at the time. Hence why you were able to make civilizations within Africa. Can you explain to me why or it's a completely different set of rules for anyone coming to Africa to come here and want to make a living for themselves?
I don't understand how that answers my question.
Sorry. You were saying that, right? Me living here and being able to make a better life for myself is a
Yeah.
form of reparations.
No,
in
I'm
itself.
asking, could it be perceived
Yeah, could it be
as,
seen? But the thing is, I'm not given any funding by the government to fly over here. My family weren't given that. They had to work themselves to get here. So where is the reparations?
Okay,
being
so
paid?
can I just ask?
So that's why I
because
thought-
you made it personal.
Yeah,
Can I ask what your background is, how you came, to, how your family came to be here?
I'm South African, Lesotho to be exact. My dad is Congolese. They both met. My dad came over here, worked for a little while, had to pay for the tickets for me, my mum, and so and so. We came here. They worked. It was very hard for them, and then continues the
So
story.
you're actually
from
not
there.
here from slavery then, so you wouldn't be getting reparations at all?
No, not at all.
So you're fighting for the other brothers? And
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, okay, so that's... Okay, so not you, not dealing with you, but with people who actually came here either via Jamaica where they were taken as
But
slaves
even,
or...
I'll give you an example. Even the Windrush people had to pay for their own tickets to get here. They weren't given government funding.
But neither was I. My family escaped the Nazis, and they weren't given government funding. They had to pay for. Most of the Jews that ended up in the UK actually thought they were going to America. They were sold tickets to America, and they ended up in Liverpool. Can you imagine how disappointed you'd be if you thought you were getting New York and you got Liverpool?
Of course. And I'll ask again. When we talk about Jewish reparations, people do take that seriously. They do take that seriously. But when we seem to talk about African reparations, or Jamaican reparations, or Caribbean or African American, why is there all of a sudden this hostility when it comes to authenticating whether or not they are owed reparations? And I'll say it again: the people who came from Jamaica, right, to build the UK because of the war situation, right? Yeah. They were not paid to come here.
But they were economic migrants.
Of course, they were economic migrants. But again,
that's the same. Your family were economic migrants.
Of course, they were.
My family were refugees.
Right.
On one side, the other side were Irish economic migrants.
Right.
That's completely different to say, like people who come as economic migrants. There's no reparations involved.
The question is, why is there that need to be an economic migrant?
Because life is incredible in the West, and less so in some nations.
False. I disagree. Because immigration works in circulation. Most people don't stay here. They come here, they work, they amass wealth, and then they move back home.
That's not true.
I'm sorry.
That was the expectation. That was it. That's why. That's why.
It's the same with America. It's the same. Whether or not you believe it, it's true.
No, it's something I've actually looked into extensively. It's not true.
It's the same with America. They think that Mexican migrants, right, are going over there and staying there. I'm sorry, no, they go over there, they build their wealth.
Talking about here, the Bangladeshi community moved here in the 60s, still here. The Jamaican community said they would go back.
He's talking about back home when it's stable. They make money and they go home.
Okay, but if you look at the big waves of migration to the UK, whether it's Jews, Huguenots, Bangladeshi, all these communities remain. They haven't gone home. That's all I'm saying.
No worries. And I'll ask you again. How many of these colonies and people of the migration are moving from places that were previously colonized by the Europeans?
So, between the Muslims and the Europeans, they colonized the entire world. Why is it that Arabic is spoken in Morocco? Why is it that you go to Montreal, they speak French? Why is it in Lebanon they speak French?
But how do you know Arabs are not doing their best to stabilize things within Northern Africa?
No, but it doesn't matter, they're colonizers.
They sent aid. They took more migrants than we did during the Syria and Libya thing. The bombing of Libya.
Which states? Turkey took a lot, but the Arab states, most of the Arab states threw up their borders. Jordan took a lot. Jordan took a lot. Yeah, Jordan took 2 million.
More than we did. In Dubai.
But it's because it's on the border.
So this idea that you're the only ones trying to make anything better. Yeah. The idea that you're the only ones trying to make anything better within colonies that have been previously.
You keep doing that. Yeah.
All right. The idea that they have been are the only ones trying to better situations for countries that are destabilized. It's completely false.
That's not even the conversation. I wasn't saying anyone's trying to better. We're talking about. You said that migrants come here and then they go home, and I'm saying that's not been the case in the United Kingdom. It might be the case in America. I'm sorry,
whether or not you believe it, that is the case, and I've seen it myself.
The Bangladeshi community is still here. The Huguenots are still here. The Jews are still here. The Jamaicans are still here.
That's great.
The Pakistanis are still here.
I'm talking about the African. I'm talking about half the Jamaicans gone back home. When we talk about Jamaican as well, yeah, precisely. When we talk about Jamaicans, I do have a Jamaican friend, and he has property back home, and he says once he's done, he's going back home.
Every Israeli I know that lives in the UK says they're going home tomorrow to Israel. They never go home. Every Pakistani I know says he's going home tomorrow.
Okay, let's see what you're saying is true, but I don't get the point of it. Like what you're trying to say.
The whole point is that when we're talking about economic migrants, right, and we're talking like they're different to refugees or whatever, you're acting as if like these people didn't have stable economies and stable forms of trade or whatever before certain events happened, and they've just basically moved because the European cities and European civilization is better economically astronomical.
But it
now,
is,
I
though.
would ask you, give me an example of a place where a significant amount of migrants come from that was not pre-colonialized
Moldova.
and destabilized.
Moldova.
And in comparison to African immigrants, they're the most.
In comparison, how?
In comparison to African immigrants, they're significantly larger.
The numbers.
Yes, the rate.
Okay, but well, maybe so. But you're still asking me for an example of.
I also don't understand how this relates to the initial
So I'll ask you,
question.
how was Moldova destabilized?
The
And
Cold War.
how are they destabilized now?
The Cold War, cronyism, and mafia-run countries.
When did they get their what's the word? Independence. That's it.
1991.
I don't know exactly.
91 or
Human
something.
Encyclopedia.
Okay, so what?
Some places still haven't got their liberal. Well, no. Some places 2000 I think got their liberal.
Okay. But
supposed thing.
so
I'll ask you again. When you compare Moldova, right, to Nigeria, which is apparently 3 times bigger than Texas,
What
right?
about Biafran?
Sorry, again?
What do you think about Biafran?
Get to that. I don't even know what that means.
I want to know what you're saying.
Yeah. So when we compare Nigeria, where there's Christian, Muslim, right?
Yeah.
Different tribes, different languages, different cultures, right? And they all already had problems with each other that they were trying to fix. And then you lump them all into one place where they can all basically fight off. How do you solve that?
Lump them where?
Into one place.
In Nigeria or somewhere
Nigeria
else?
was never Nigeria in the beginning.
Oh,
it was separated.
you mean the drawing of borders?
Yes. When you then make Nigeria one place, disregarding the fact that there's different tribes, different religions, different cultural practices.
Yeah.
How do you then stabilize it? And what have you done to stabilize that since?
Well, Europe's way of stabilising things was basically to fight each other until pretty much about 70 years ago. I would assume you wouldn't say that's the model to sort out.
Say that again?
I would presume that you don't think that's the model to work on.
It's definitely not the model to work
How
on.
does this
Well,
answer?
I'm asking
How
right
does
now,
that
in this
answer the initial
civilization,
question?
what have we done to stabilize these
Because
environments?
Did I miss something?
Biafra,
How
the
does
Civil
this
War.
answer the question, which I said about reparations? Like, could it be perceived as? Because that's how we got onto this, and I kind of don't understand how
It can
that
be perceived as dangerous. We're
No,
talking
no,
about-
not dangerous. When I asked, so as you were a bad example because you actually an economic migrant, or your parents were economic migrants, but someone who was stolen from their land, taken on slave ships to Jamaica, then either they came here or America, and they now benefit from all the benefits of the West. My question was, could that be perceived as a form of reparation?
This is the
Because
question.
quality
What
of-
benefits are we talking about?
the
Because we talked about earlier.
education,
Of course.
economics. You have a far better, not you, but someone who was suffered under slavery. Their ancestors now benefit from living in the lands that they were stolen from and taken to.
Yeah.
Fair enough. I agreed to
I
that.
said it was the most controversial question
No,
I've
no,
ever
no,
asked.
Agree to that to an extent. I'll agree to that to an extent. But then I will ask you. What benefits? Because once again, segregation in education only ended in 1968, and even then it was controversial for a black student to be on a campus. It took ages for them to get used to that.
Same with Jews who were banned from
that's
university.
fine,
I
that's
agree.
fine,
Yeah.
that's fine.
But today that's not
But
the
you
case.
didn't. But you didn't have Jim Crow. You didn't have Jim Crow, did you?
You had segregation. You had
segregation.
You had quotas.
Quotas saying.
You had quotas on Jewish people that could live in certain areas.
Of course. Yeah.
That could
Exactly. White flag. Yeah.
That could go to universities that were allowed to join certain. Jews were banned from certain professions.
So times
But
have
today,
changed.
but
for the
today
better,
I
would
have
you
the
argue?
same.
Times have changed.
Yeah, today I have the same
You think so or not?
opportunities as you.
But
Arguably,
the
you have
question-
more than me
the
because you've been
question-
to university.
No, the question is,
Simply-
the question is, when you say I have more opportunities, or we have both the equal amount of opportunities, I will ask again the same question I asked at the beginning. Why do they still need to block the name of applicants in universities?
And my answer to that was because we live in an age of identity politics where there's huge. But I'm saying,
no, of course, I agree. I was just going to say who set that precedent.
and they set the precedent because we came from a very, very racist world. But I'm saying we're not in that today. I can join a country club today. I couldn't 60 years ago.
I disagree. If the people who are if the people
They
who
wouldn't
are
let me.
still
They'll let
accepting,
they'll let Jews in. They won't let Geordies in.
if the people who are still accepting the thinking minds of tomorrow in the most prestigious establishment, Oxford, have to block, right? And this is the most prestigious establishment, have to block the names because they're less likely to pick someone with an ethnic name, right? How can you then say? So how can you then say, right, from the education point of view, right? And education is the door to everything. How can you then say we are then still equal in opportunities?
Okay, so my name is Joseph Cohen. If I apply, what's your full name?
Pongo, right?
If we apply to the same university, are you saying that because I've got a Jewish name and you've got a South African name, I'm not going to assume
It's
tribe,
an Indian name.
An Indian name, okay, sorry, an Indian name.
You are more likely to get selected.
Why?
Because
Why would a Jew be more likely?
Is John not a European name?
Joseph.
Joseph, sorry. Joseph. Is Joseph not a
It's
European
also
name?
a very common African name, like today.
Yusuf, come on.
Yusuf.
There's a lot, right. Before I come and destroy this,
This is
bogus
his mindset's always aggressive. I'm going to destroy you, boy. I'm going to destroy
who
you.
has the most? Who has the most? What ethnic group has the most?
Money.
Right? Not money. Right?
Good looks.
Well, yeah. This side of the tribe, not your side.
Come on!
Right. Right. Who has? What, what's up?
And when you get to the point, I want to know what you're saying.
Okay. Well, I'll start my terms there.
For sure.
Good. Who has the most prizes for science? For like the Nobel Peace Prize for science.
He's saying again, he's a Jewish supremacist. He comes along and says how smart the Jews are every time.
Who has? Thank you. So, right, to get those awards, you'd have to go through a university system somewhere.
Yeah, because for the last when we were allowed into universities,
Probably about 80 or 90 years ago.
90 years
Yeah,
ago.
you
So-
did bloody well. I know that. But I'm saying you had to get in. Yeah.
Yeah, we're saying Jews can go to university today. No one's saying they can't.
I'm saying, but
we're
now,
saying historically.
But the question was phrased today.
But yes, he went to university.
No,
I didn't.
more like-
You went to university.
All right.
You haven't actually
More
asked which
likely.
university I went to.
Which university?
Some universities are piss poor and really easy to get into.
What
So
university
you're
did
making
you-
assumption there.
Open university.
I'm not going to bait myself. Go on.
No.
Go on, bro.
What did you study?
I stepped out at that point.
No.
What did you study?
So again,
What did you study?
It was mental health nursing at the time.
Okay.
Yeah. So again,
So
didn't
one of my
destroy
things
your
I find
argument.
quite interesting, yeah, is if your family came from South Africa, I would assume they were middle class. Is that no? They were okay. That's very rare.
thoroughly working class.
No, that's good. Because
And if you know
usually,
if you know the history of South Africa, it's taken
Yeah.
a while for people to actually get equal opportunities.
Yeah.
It's barely even been 50 to 40 years.
Yeah.
So
No, I was racing because it's Sikaleli Africa and the apartheid marches.
So it's one of those things where when you
have a
create
good friend
a
from
circumstance,
Soweto.
if you create circumstances where there's already limited options
Yeah.
and less of a stepping stone for someone else, how do you then turn around and say that we live in a more equal society?
So because you have the same opportunities as me, as this Glaswegian. Like Glaswegians can get into sorry, Scotland. Scottish can get to university now. They even have universities in Scotland, St Andrews. We live in a different age. Like what holds someone from Scotland back? What holds someone from Brixton back? What holds someone from Newcastle back? Is money. And that's the biggest disabler in today's society. And money cares not about your skin colour.
It's cool. I disagree. Again, when we're talking about supposedly we have the same opportunities and the same options, right? Do I have the same opportunities?
Sterling.
Do I have the same opportunities to become a movie star as everyone else?
Have you watched the movies recently? There's no absence of black people on screen today.
No, that's actually brilliant that you brought that up. They systematically don't allow certain people to become supposedly actors because they don't market well. Do you know why they don't market well? Because people don't like seeing people of color on screen. And the
I would
reason I'll say
disagree,
this,
man.
That's
I will
nonsense.
stop.
Okay, can I?
If you
That's
disagree, bro,
nonsense.
that's okay.
Can I make a suggestion?
as a fact, though.
Can I say?
I'll give you some evidence if you want.
sure.
When Star Trek first kind of screened their first interracial kiss, do you know what happened?
When was this?
In a super racist time.
1968. Do you know what happened?
We're talking about today.
No, but this sets a precedent for how the industry acts later on.
We're just at-
How does it act
Do you know why?
now?
Do you know what? I'll continue. Let me finish and then you'll understand. So I'll ask you again. What happened?
You tell me.
The ratings shot down.
Right.
They had to take off that romance completely. Otherwise, they said they would have been cancelled.
Right.
So I'm going to
Now
make an
that's
analogy.
Star Trek.
Do you know how many Jews owned property 300 years ago?
Wait. Let me finish.
None. They weren't allowed.
Let me finish.
Now
Let me finish. Let me finish.
They own lots of property.
And Catholics as well. And Catholics.
Let me finish.
Catholics run it.
Now, how many interracial films do you see across the board in Hollywood?
Almost every film.
No.
What do you mean interracial? You mean a cast that of multiracial?
Pre-2010, and I know this, pre-2010, can you name me an interracial film where it's a black man and a white woman?
Oh, sorry, yes, I thought you meant like an interracial cast as opposed to an
You mean like a romance?
Yeah, because historically, the majority has always been white men with foreign women. That's the majority.
Okay.
Now I'll ask
I-
you, what is the percentage, and is it reflecting and equal with foreign men and white women?
Okay, can I just?
Is it equal?
Can I make a?
I need to answer your question on that, bro.
Now I'll ask you
Can I-
again. I'll ask you
can I-
again.
can I answer your
when
question?
you set that kind of precedent and you set that kind of marketability, you already make it harder for certain people to get into, say, the entertainment industry as it is. So I will ask you, why do you think there's such an upsurgence in interracial films recently as opposed to pre-2014,
Identity politics. I
pre-2015?
believe there's a huge, as I said, it's the same with university. There's a huge political
I disagree.
movement that
I disagree.
fixates on the colour of someone's skin
I believe
and
more
puts in
people,
place.
I believe more people of representation now are in the circles that make the decisions.
I would say that's true as
So
well.
That
I
might
do
be true,
believe
but can I
that
make-
I do believe now we do have a little bit more of a
Can I-
representative voice.
Can I
kind of thing.
answer your
But
question?
That's
there
all
is
I was
still-
saying.
there's still, no,
I
I'm
was-
saying there's still that system.
It
where
took you
we
a long time to
understand-
agree with us, but that's fine.
Can I answer your question?
It's like even in Star Wars, the recent Star Wars. You think people hate the last one because it was shit? Please.
I haven't
Man.
seen the Star
Okay,
Wars.
so
I thought it was
can I just
objectively
make
bad, yeah.
something that I think is?
You could not debate me on that
I
one.
tell you what I did.
As a nerd, you could
What
not
I
debate
didn't
me.
like
I'm
was Black
pretty nerdy.
Panther. I thought that was a rubbish movie. I watched it on the plane to New York. Has
I saw,
anyone
it as
seen
well.
that?
I saw it as well.
It
Wasn't my style.
Anyway, go on, go on.
No, I
I don't like
I think
superheroes.
that
Me neither.
that it's very easy to look at this and think and sort of see it through racial lenses. Whereas for me, if there's less, it's hard for something like a black actor who desperately wants to be an actor, maybe he's getting overlooked for certain roles. That's not, to my mind, that's not because he's black per se. It's not a racial. It's partly a commercial decision because when people are making movies, they're thinking about the market, who's going to watch it.
Of course.
People identifying, and it's.
And he's trying to see the market.
To that point,
Now-
to that
hold
point,
on.
No, go on, go on.
So my point is that in a society where the overwhelming majority of the market is white, then there is by virtue of that.
Brilliant.
Right.
We watch movies, and some people watch movies.
'Cause you wanna-
a lot
I
of
mean,
the
I
time-
couldn't care less.
A lot of the times to see themselves within certain characters.
Yeah.
It's about the message. It's not about the facial features. None of you look like Brad Pitt. None of you look like Jeremy
How
Clarkson.
dare you?
Shut
How dare you?
When we talk about Americans specifically, America is 1 in 3 morbidly obese.
Yeah.
Where do you see that on screen? You don't see that on screen. So
Amy
don't talk to
Schumer.
me about rejection on screen and
Okay, can I ask you a
presenting
question?
certain-
I got a point.
Before Eminem shattered the racial shattered the racial stereotype of hip hop artists.
Yeah.
Can you name any white hip hop artist that wasn't ridiculed?
Vanilla Ice.
That wasn't he was ridiculed.
I know.
That wasn't really good. I'm not big on hip hop, so that's actually really hard.
I am. And I don't know.
Can I just put in about the exams? You know,
I'll give you-
about
I'll
the
give you-
exam and the numbers. The thing about the exam and the numbers was it wasn't just, you're right about the race, that it was put into, but it was primarily, I understand, because women were they felt that women were being marked down. If they saw a woman's name on an exam paper, so it's about gender as well.
Yeah, there was gender as well.
It was a big thing.
Yeah, it was a big
Yet
thing.
women are the most qualified people coming out of university today.
Doesn't necessarily mean there's
They
not going to
weren't-
be
they weren't-
exactly.
You know, that's
Exactly.
one of the reasons why they put the numbers.
Doesn't mean
on
there's
the
gonna be-
names,
there's not gonna be
because they'd
obstacles
see a
just
woman's
because they're
name
more educated,
and
like-
they thought that people were marking down as soon as they saw them.
Right, so I got a question for you. So you're talking about movies and the industry, and maybe I'm wrong with the point you're trying to make, so correct me. But you're saying that because you're saying you knew the number of films that had interracial mix of cast and such, right? And I want to ask you, as he's talked about the market, which is extremely relevant whenever you talk about business, and there's a thing called in-group preference, right? And that doesn't. I would argue very strongly that does not equate to racism. Okay. Now, the next thing I want to say is I imagine in Africa, I don't know, it's a huge place, many countries and cultures. I imagine they have a native movie industry somewhere. And I imagine the predominant cast are black.
So like in Africa?
Yeah, they are.
You understand me?
Yeah,
So
of course.
I would say that if I put those two up, the Western version and the African native version of cinema, you would see the same disparities, and I would argue that it's not a problem.
That's a good point.
Why should there be loads of white people thrust
when
into
you talk
African
about
movies?
African cinema, when you talk about African cinema, you will find white people in a range of diverse roles. Not frequent, but they will be in a range of diverse roles. When we talk about African and African people in cinema, in Hollywood, please tell me the diverse roles that you can see across the board.
Many, man, many. There's plenty of very famous films that have black protagonists that are heroic, that are the villain, that are portrayed in a good light, in a bad light. Everything.
Independence Day.
Yeah.
Who saves the world in Independence Day? It's a black man.
Actually, there's even a black god. Morgan Freeman was a black god.
So there's no archetype.
Well,
Morgan Freeman's another archetype as well. There's another archetype.
No, but
there's no archetype.
Well, do you mean archetypes or do you mean stereotypes?
In terms of, you have, I'll give you an example. You have the soft, white, kind of like dweeby, Toby, Peter Parker kind of character.
Right,
yeah?
yeah.
Very dweeby, comes across a bit of power, keeps his humility, but is not very kind of alpha male. He's very kind of beta male, but very kind of sympathetic towards people and empathetic.
Okay.
So is that like the 50 Cent type of...
Can you give me an example of a similar superhero who's black?
Does there need to be?
Of course there needs to be.
Why? Why should everything be equally represented?
Because if you
get it.
Because if you create, like I said, we're talking about archetypes. If you give the impression that there's always either the cowardly black guy, and you get this a lot in films, or the overly masculine black guy. And this relates right back to the propaganda that they used to assert that black men are hypersexual, black men are like aggressive, black men are too abrupt. Now, when we're talking about character archetypes, I have to ask you, where is the archetype for the soft African male?
I don't know. And does there need to be one?
Of course there needs to be one.
I don't
because
see
there
why.
needs to be representation.
Living in America.
Well,
Living in America.
But wait. You asked me why there needs to be representation. No, that's fair enough. You asked me why there needs to be representation of that. But then at the same time, you turned around and said it's about seeing yourself on screen for these people. It's about projecting and seeing themselves in group preference, right?
I didn't say that. I said that's the reason for it.
That's the reason for it.
Yeah.
So I don't understand. We're talking about representation in Hollywood. Black representation in Hollywood and movies. How basically
We started on reparations.
How basically there's always an archetype. There's overly aggressive African man, overly cowardly kind of thing, and there's never really an in between or an exploration of those characters.
But why I don't see why that needs to be I don't see why that needs to be an issue, man, because the problem I would argue the problem with your argument, one of the problems is that again, how far do you go? How far do you extrapolate? There has to be there has to be an archetype for somebody that's fat, somebody that's super thin, somebody that's mentally ill, somebody that's anorexic, somebody that's mixed race. Why?
But this is so
why?
funny.
There's no intrinsic value.
But this is exactly
it's
so
ridiculous.
funny, and you need to calm down.
I'm not.
You need to calm down. You need to calm down.
I'm passionate.
When we talk about
It's
this,
the archetypal
in
angry
particular,
white
when
man.
we go to foreign countries such as China, Japan, and whatever, right? Where do you think they get their idea of black people from?
In Japan?
Yeah.
I don't know.
The media.
What YouTube videos they will tell you, I thought black people were lazy. When you go to Jamaican countries, apparently that's far from the truth.
Okay.
I thought black people were overly violent. I thought black people were aggressive. And you ask them, where did you get this from? Movies.
Right.
And hip hop.
So when
and hip hop.
I'll give
who is in control of the hip hop industry, the music that's produced, the style.
White people.
White people. White people.
The white man is behind.
No, it's not even funny. It's no. You joke. No. Because there's certain songs that don't paint you guys in a great picture. When they were put on albums, they were asked to be taken off. He's allowed to get heated, but I'm not.
No, it's just the you guys bit.
Again, when certain songs that are not flattering and quite woke, as some people will put it, are put on albums, they are asked to be taken off because they will be offensive and they will offend white people. Can you please tell me, right, how that's black owners or black artists having control over their labels?
So I don't know about the individual cases you're talking about, but if you look at, I know hip hop.
Wasn't
my culture.
NWA like one of the biggest examples?
NWA, they were.
Didn't they put something? They were talking about like how Jews run the industry, and they didn't want them to put that song.
Oh,
on
so
the
you
track
say, that's what you meant by you guys? You mean the Jews?
No. Did you run NWA? How old are you?
How old am I?
Yeah.
I'm 30. I don't want to say my exact age
You're
because
definitely
people
not old.
want to
You're
kill me.
definitely not old enough to have been managing NWA, so definitely not you. But when he was talking about the Jewish manager who owned the label, right, and speaking about him in particular, about how he's censoring his voice, the guy told him to take that
All
label
your
off.
references
So,
are ancient. I'm talking about today. The hip hop
the
that's produced today.
1970s is ancient.
No, 70s, 80s and 90s.
The 80s is ancient.
So I'm saying today, the hip hop industry today is predominantly, most of the records we'll listen to have black producers, are on black labels, labels that are owned by people from the black community. They're not owned by white, unless on some major corporates.
So can I ask, even if it's blacks, right? Can I ask, why did Tim Westwood, who didn't grow up in any of this struggle, right? No. You say that in particular. We're putting this message across. I want to ask, why does Tim Westwood carry on perpetrating this message when he has had the opportunity otherwise? But he saw
Tim Westwood was a laughing stock in the hip hop community
but
when
did
he
he
used to be big.
Did he not
was
put,
the son
did he
of
not
a
put across
bishop.
that message?
He had a silly message.
Did he not put across that message?
No. So I'm saying you can take cases from 20 years ago, but I'm saying today, if you go to any downtown suburb in wherever, Detroit, Chicago, and listen to the music that's being produced there on the streets by actual people, they're producing it, they're pushing out the message. It's not white people that are writing these songs. You don't have white ghostwriters.
Sorry. You're automatically assuming that people watch music videos and they go out and kill people.
No,
There
I'm
is
not.
no evidence
You
for
said
that.
in Japan, the image of black people is made by white people in movies. I said, if you look at hip hop, that's different. Most of the hip hop music that's written by hip hop artists is either written by them or their ghostwriters. Their ghostwriters usually aren't white, sometimes they are, but there's a large amount of content in the hip hop world which is produced by black people. So if you want to say that the image of black people overseas is painted by white people, I'm saying I don't believe that's the case in the hip hop scene.
Nice argument.
Or with R&B.
I don't think the R&B image is that like aggressive. The R&B is more like lovey.
Some of it, but
Yeah, I do, but I don't know. I like to try and take these conversations to something more practical, like what do we want to change or what do we want to achieve in the current day, rather
To be honest, I don't think
talking
there's
too much
that
about
much.
the past.
I don't think there's that much that we can change. For me personally, the conversation is there, the argument is there, the logistics are there, but the voice, for some reason, that seems to be very kind of like, you know, against this whole kind of movement of actually establishing wrongs and trying to amend them. You've just come up with like some of the most, not to be rude to you guys, it's been a decent conversation, some of the most ludicrous examples as to why certain people shouldn't be owed reparations, or why there's an obstacle to certain people having reparations.
What did I say that was ludicrous? What? No.
I said.
What did I say that was ludicrous?
Give me an example. I think you asked me a question, bear with me, I'm trying to remember. You asked me a question in particular about how if we go back historically and look back at the people, they were violent anyway. Humanity, right?
Humanity is violent.
I asked you for an example of African societies. I asked you an example of African societies that had the same level of destabilizing violence as Europe. You couldn't give me an answer.
I'm not a historian or
Then
an
why
anthropologist.
did you come up with the questions if you haven't done the research to do so?
Okay, going off basic premises that we're all human and we're all running on the same programming, as in the way that we interrelate in our minds. And to say that one group of humans is intrinsically more peaceful than another, I would say is not
the history is there.
By the way,
no one is saying the history
I'll
is
give
there.
some examples.
It's read up.
So the
I'm giving you
Nubians,
history. Wait, give me 2
they
seconds.
had
I'm
battles.
giving you
I don't think
history.
it's
I'm
legitimate.
giving you history. I'm giving you history.
Nubians had
that
battles.
has been
They had
read.
great fortresses.
And you're saying that
Who were they fighting?
I can't really trust that history. That's up to
Somalia,
you. That's your responsibility
fighting the
to then
Arabs.
go up and
Still
read
fighting
it.
the Arabs
I wouldn't
today.
be presenting this point forward if it's not something that I would have
I'll
read.
make a couple of statements and you tell me whether you agree with them
Just
or not,
saying
maybe,
that
if you want.
Africans have had battles.
So,
to assume that Africans were just peace-loving, never had a war in their life is nonsense.
No. But where is it destabilizing? Where is it destabilizing?
dodge me.
No. Because I have to answer all of you. I can't just be rude. and
Okay,
listen
are
to
you
whatever.
saying Egyptians are African?
Say that again?
Egyptians are the
Egypt
African.
is an African.
They went into the Middle East and conquered vast lands. They stretched right the way up to Syria, where they conquered lands from other people. That's a destabilizing war. Egyptians.
Can you prove to me how it was destabilizing?
So if you go
Destabilizing?
to
No. There's a big difference. There's a lot, especially with the Moorish empires. The Moorish empires took over Spain, but they left Spain with a vast amount of knowledge and technology. That's
can make
very
the same
different.
argument for
That's very
European
different.
colonization, man.
What did you leave?
It's not a legit argument.
What did you leave? What did Europeans
systems
leave?
of government.
So South Africa is a great
I wouldn't make that argument, but I don't
the
think it's a
question
good
is,
way to
no, you
double
said that. You said that you can say that for Europeans. You have to prove what did Europeans leave for Africans.
So I'll get to my questions before you jump to him. So
Do you not want to answer that question?
Well, the question should be to me because I was responding.
No, exactly.
We're all human beings, right? Let's not take this person.
Well, that's what I'm trying to say.
He's Jewish.
Some human beings.
So I'll ask
Reptilian from
you
outer
this.
space.
Are you going to answer the question? What did Europeans leave Africans to better themselves as a civilization?
Okay, you could make a lot of statements. You
Say
could
that
say
with any Asian culture too, though.
you could
They
say
completely destroyed.
interjection of technology.
I'm sorry, did they take you in masses and make you work and completely...
Actually, they did. The American Railroad was built by the Chinese.
Completely make you subhuman until the 1980s.
Do you know about the railway was also built by
The railways?
Chinese?
And
Yeah,
the
I
Japanese,
do know about
Yeah,
the railway.
so
they're all
that's-
shoved in California and not allowed to leave.
Right?
They were taken away from their schools. They're like, oh,
course.
you're in
Of
school? Oh,
This
you're
is-
Japanese.
this is my-
Goodbye.
No worries.
Goodbye.
Everyone suffered in history. That's the
That's
thing.
what I'm trying to
Were they
say.
taken...
Exactly,
were they
that's
taken-
what I'm saying.
I'm asking you.
Who suffered the most?
Were they taken... Were they...
It's not even the case.
Can that be quantified, man?
Who suffered the most though?
Can that be quantified?
Yes, because when we talk about who suffered the most, if you have suffered more, you are going to take time and a lot more time to develop than other people. So I don't understand how
Let's get
logic
off
escapes
bypass
you.
theory.
I don't understand.
Okay, so which one? So you tell me which one?
So I'll ask you.
Which one's worse? Slavery or the Holocaust? That's basically what you're
When you
saying.
compare China, wait, no.
I'm not
When you
sure,
compare China
even
to
if that
Africa,
was the case, if that was the case,
what's the
right,
madness?
I'm not sure that bringing that to the front.
What's the population?
Yeah, I reckon this is going to get like 12 views on YouTube.
So when we talk about
At least a buck.
Come take over everything from your melody.
Come, man, say it straight. Man, don't listen to BBC. Man, don't listen to ITV.
It's something I've heard you many times saying. And as I've mentioned to you just before on the camera, I said to you, if I show you the truth, will you accept it? You said yes. Okay. You saying that Ali bin Abi Talib radiallahu anhu arda, he is better than the prophets and messengers, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
But except Prophet Muhammad.
That's good. Okay. Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam is Imam. Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam is Imam, correct? Ali is Imam. Why Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam better than him?
Is that question, yeah?
Yeah, because remember Ali is Imam.
Okay.
Prophet